Screw that one up a little bit. This is the Easy Betting Show. My name is Easy, and I'm going to be talking about college football week 2 picks in this one. Big slate. I won't be talking about the entirety of the slate just because I don't have bets for all of the games, but I am going to be talking about the games that I do have bets in. So, a lot of good stuff coming in this one. Before I get to my actual picks for this week, I thought I would go back and talk a little bit about week 0 and week 1 and kind of where I'm sitting at for those 2 weeks, just to, kind of keep everybody on pace with how we're doing, the transparency of my units and everything like that going through so far. So this is the tracker that I will have every week, both for college and for the NFL seasons. I'll be doing this every week before the games. Well, before my picks, sorry. Just to kind of keep an idea of what we're doing. So, as you can see, sucked in week 0, start of the season. Everybody was kind of figuring out what was going on, and I did really bad. 3-8 in week 0, lost 5 units. It just wasn't that good. Now, a lot of it was Florida State. If you remember from week 0, not only did I pick Florida State, actually I picked the over. I thought Florida State was going to win, but I picked the over. Obviously, we just missed the over there. There was some player props in there too that didn't work because of that. Now, I didn't do any player props in week 1, just in week 0. So not sure how that possibly could have affected the outcomes, because in week 0 of the player props I did, 2 of my 3 wins were player props. But either way, it was just a shit week and not good at all. But week 1, as you can see, a whole lot better. 22-12. Again, Florida State, which, yeah, I have learned the 2 weeks now, not picking Florida State anymore. But yeah, Saturday specifically was a really good day. On Saturday, I believe I went like 15-4 on Saturday. Now Sunday, I think I went 0 for on Sunday, so that kind of knocked it back down a little bit. But plus 10.5 units in one weekend. Can't ask for much better than that. Definitely a big step up from week 0. And on the year so far for college football, 25-20 plus 5 units. So not a bad start to the college football year. Definitely want to get better. Can't see any more weeks like week 0. But like I said, it was the beginning of the season. Sometimes you screw up, and that's what happened week 0. But taking care of that, let's go on ahead and get into the week 2 picks. I have 14 picks for this week, and I'm just going to, instead of breaking them up into parts like I did last week where I had 3 different shows, I'm just going to do one show this week. I'm going to do all 14 picks in this episode right here. And if I find some stuff tonight or tomorrow morning before the games start, I don't know, maybe I'll go live for a couple minutes. Maybe I'll throw a short up. You never know. But for right now, I just have these 14 that I really like, and that's going to be it. But make sure you keep an eye out on the channel, because I could put something out that I'm not aware of at the moment, and you don't want to miss that. But with that being said, let's get right into it. The first game that I'm going to be talking about is the only Friday game that I'll be talking about. There's only 3. I'm only betting 1 because it's the only one that I really like. And it's at possibly one of the most incredible stadiums in college football. It's not massive by any means, but the fact that it's right there on the water like that is just unreal. I saw it for the first time last week when I watched the Miami, Ohio game playing Northwestern. And if you haven't seen it, go on Google after the video, of course. Don't do it right now. Watch me. But go look up their stadium, because it's just amazing. I wasn't even aware of this. But Duke at Northwestern. Northwestern is 2.5 point favorites. They're minus 144 on the money line. Duke plus 2.5, plus 120 on the money line, and the over under is 37.5. It is a low under, but when you look at what these two teams did last week, it makes a lot of sense. Neither one's offense looked great. Northwestern's offense looked better than Duke's did, but Northwestern also turned the ball over twice, so they couldn't really do much with it. Really neither one looked good on offense. Duke only put up 26 points against Elon. Northwestern 13 points against Miami of Ohio. But Duke specifically didn't seem to have much of a running game at all. They only put up 59 yards on 27 carries, but they were playing Elon. So you would think that if they had even a somewhat decent running game that they'd be able to do more than that. So it was really bad for Duke. Like I said, Northwestern moved the ball decently on the Red Hawks defense last week, but 2 turnovers kept them from scoring more than they probably should have. Mike Wright looked okay. He wasn't great, though. He only went 18 of 30 for 178 yards. But he did have 65 yards on 9 carries on the ground, which I think could impact this game. Cam Porter, the running back, also ran for 63 yards on 13 carries. So what's most likely going to happen here is Northwestern is going to run the ball a lot, especially considering that they're calling for up to 20-mile-an-hour winds in this game. So that's obviously going to affect the passing game. Duke, I don't think, is going to be able to run the ball. So they're going to have to throw it, and I just don't trust their offense. So I have 2 bets in this one. I'm betting Northwestern minus 2.5. And then I'm also betting the under 37.5. Both are minus 118, so I'm going to put 1.2 units on both of those. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored here, and I think Northwestern is just going to get the better of them. I think this is possibly a field goal win, maybe a touchdown win, but not a lot of scoring, especially with the weather, and then combined that the offenses just aren't good. The second game is probably the biggest, or one of the bigger games of the week. Texas at Michigan. Texas is 7.5-point favorites. They're minus 275 on the money line. Michigan is plus 220 on the money line, and the over-under is 42.5. Now, this spread has jumped up a lot because of the games last week. Texas rolled. They won 52-0 against the Colorado State team that shouldn't be that bad this year. So that definitely have a lot of people that weren't high on Texas, like me at the beginning of the season, a little bit higher on them now because they did look good. Quinn Ewers did throw an interception, but other than that, he looked really good. They also ran for almost 200 rushing yards with a bunch of different guys. I think they had like 8 different guys have a carry. So you can't even really look at one guy that kind of outperformed in the running game. It was just everyone. They also had Arch Manning come in for a little bit. He scored a touchdown that obviously excited all the Texas people, even though it really didn't matter. The defense, they didn't give up much in the passing game, but they did give up over 100 yards on the ground to Justin Marshall, which could be a problem in future games, but I don't think it'll be a problem against this Michigan team because if you looked at the game last week, they didn't look good at all, but they really didn't look good rushing. Their O-line seems to have some problems. Their quarterbacks definitely have some problems. I don't know who they're going to put out at quarterback this week, but I don't think either one is very good. So I don't think it's really going to matter much. And on the defensive side of the ball, they gave up over 230 passing yards to, a shit team. So what is Texas going to do? I think Texas goes crazy in this one. I think even though it's jumped up to over a touchdown, I think Texas still covers. It's just, I don't think Michigan's going to be that good this year, and I think they're still getting the we won the national championship love from the end of last season. So I don't know. If you're letting Fresno State throw on you for 230 yards, Ewers is going to throw on you for 500. So I have Texas minus 7.5. I grabbed this at even money. It is moving frantically like it has been the last week, so I'm not sure what it is right now. This was from a few hours ago. It may have moved, but regardless of what it is right now, regardless of what the odds are right now, Texas minus 7.5. I'm putting 2 units on it at even money. If it's jumped up, I'm betting to win 2 units because I think Texas easily wins this game and easily covers the spread. Next one that I'm going to talk about is Arkansas and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's 7.5 point favorites, minus 310 on the money line. Arkansas is plus 245 on the money line, and the over-under is 62.5. This should be a pretty good game. Both teams looked pretty good last week. Oklahoma State beat a good FCS team, obviously, in South Dakota State. They won 44-20, which I think a lot of people didn't expect, including me. I was on South Dakota State. You would think the 2-time FCS champion from the last 2 years would look better in week 1, but I think Oklahoma State was probably just that good. And it was mainly behind Ollie Gordon. He rushed for 126 yards and 3 touchdowns, caught another 20 yards. Alan Bowman also looked good, though, which I think might have surprised a few people. He went 24 of 33 for 245 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he completed a pass to 7 different guys. So I think that bodes well for the rest of their season, or at least for, the next few games, unless something happens. So definitely something to look forward to for Cowboys fans at quarterback. The defense wasn't great, though. They did give up 124 rushing yards, and they gave up 264 passing yards, which isn't horrible, but the rushing yards are probably what they need to fix when they go up against other Big 12 teams or, like this week, an SEC team. On the other side, Arkansas beat the hell out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, but that isn't saying much. It's Arkansas Pine Bluff. They did win 70-0 though, but I don't really think that tells you much about the Razorbacks. It's just one of those games where they beat up a school of the blind type team, and everybody thinks they're incredible. And I don't think that says nearly what people thinks it does. I don't know if that's how you say that. I don't know. Y'all get what I'm saying. I do think the Arkansas rushing game could show up for this one, though, which would be a big help in Arkansas's offense. But they did have 2 fumbles last week against Pine Bluff. Now, they recovered both of those, but in a game that's actually big like this one, there's a very good chance that they don't recover those kinds of mistakes. So if they don't clean up that part of the offense, that could definitely be trouble for them. But I think this one's pretty easy for who wins this week. In order for Arkansas to win, they have to stop Ollie Gordon, and I just don't think they're going to be able to do that. So I have Oklahoma State minus 7.5. That's minus 115, so I have 1.2 units on that as well. Next game, Kansas State at Tulane. And I'm excited for this one. I think this is going to be a really good game. Kansas State's 9.5 point favorites. They're minus 375 on the money line. Tulane is plus 290 on the money line. And the over-under is 47.5. Both of these teams won in a blowout last week. They looked dominant against teams that they should have, like half the country probably. So I'm going to be saying that a lot. But yeah, I mean, they both won games they should have. They both looked good, and they should have. And that's pretty much it there. I will say Avery Johnson didn't look as good as I think a lot of people thought he was going to. I mean, he looked decent, but not great. He threw an interception. He didn't have a ton of passing yards, but he was a good part of the running game, which I think a lot of people did expect. And the running game in general for Kansas State was really good. They rushed for almost 300 yards combined, and 124 of those were by DJ Giddens. So the rushing game is going to be potent for the Wildcats. And the defense didn't let UT Martin do much either, but it's UT Martin. So how much can you really say was on Kansas State's defense versus how much of it was just they were playing UT Martin? So not really sure there. Tulane had a similar game against Sela where the running game shined. They rushed for over 240 yards themselves, and it was evenly distributed among 6 guys. So they didn't really have a guy like Giddens for Kansas State where he got, a third of it. there was pretty evenly distributed among the 6 guys. Their QB Mensa, he looked pretty good. He threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 10 of 12 passing. And it was mainly because of Mario Williams, the USC transfer. He had 124 of those yards and a couple touchdowns. So they basically just threw it to Williams. He would score and they'd be off the field. And then they put in the backup. So I think Tulane's able to stay in this one. I don't know if they win. Like I said, I do think it's going to be a good game, and I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I'm not going to put any money on the money line here because I just don't trust them. But I definitely think they do enough, and they are able to score enough to stay in the game. So Tulane plus 9.5, minus 104. So you're getting really good odds on this. I'm putting 1.1 units on this one. Yeah, I think there is a chance that they could win the game, but I'm not going to bet it. I'm just going plus 9.5. I just think it's too many points. Next game is one that has cost me some money in Georgia Tech in week 0, but hopefully they can make up for it here and they can win me some money and balance it back out. Georgia Tech at Syracuse. Georgia Tech is 2.5 point favorites, minus 137 on the money line. Syracuse is plus 114 on the money line. And the over-under is 61.5. Obviously, Georgia Tech beat Florida State. That doesn't look as good as it did a week ago because, of course, Florida State then goes and loses to Boston College at home. So how much can you really put into that win now? But they did still beat them. And they also looked really good against Georgia State last week, too. So that is a second game where you're not just relying on, well, the Florida State game was a fluke. Okay, well, they also played really well against Georgia State. So was it a fluke? Or maybe Boston College is also better than we think. Who knows? The whole thing's a clusterfuck right now. We'll figure it out by like week 6, I guess. But that being said, and I know I say that a lot, by the way. You're going to hear it a lot. It's just something that fills the void for me when I speak. So, yeah, whatever. I was thinking about that. Syracuse, on the other side, they looked good against Ohio last week, specifically on the offense. They did give up I think 22 points to Ohio on the defensive side of the ball, so not great there. But Kyle McCord threw for over 350 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, though, which against these MAC schools and FCS schools, I think do tell you a little bit, but you never, it's not huge. Yeah, that offense is going to be really good. I think the Georgia Tech offense is good. I think this is a nice spot to play the over 61.5. That's not going to be my pick for this game because I think it is just a little bit too high. But I think that is a good option there. The bet that I'm going to go with on this one is Georgia Tech minus 2.5, minus 118. I'm going to put 1.2 units on it. I'm just going to ride with the Haynes King, Jamal Haynes combo until they tell me not to. I mean, they've looked good. The offense has looked really good. The defense hasn't looked bad. And I think they're a good team right now. And until they play a legit team or until they go out there and look like garbage, I think they're a good team to back. The next good team to back, you like how I did that there? Baylor at Utah. Utah is minus 14.5, minus 670 on the money line. Baylor is plus 470 on the money line. And the over-under is 55.5. I thought the spread would be higher here. I mean, I get that Baylor beat Tarleton State pretty handedly, but it was Tarleton State. Like, I don't understand. I don't know. I just don't get this spread. I mean, the quarterback threw 2 interceptions against Tarleton State. I don't know. Either way. They also only averaged 3.8 yards a carry on the ground. So in total, their offense just wasn't incredible like a team like this should look against a bad team. On the other hand, Utah, they looked good last week against Southern Utah, as they should. I mean, again, they played another team that sucks like half the country did. So, of course, they looked good. Cam Rising also looked good. First game back in like a year and a half or some crazy shit. So that was kind of a little bit of a question mark on what he would do in his first game back. He threw for over 250 yards on only 10 of 15 passing and 5 touchdowns. His leading receiver was his running back. who went for 150 yards on 3 receptions and 2 touchdowns. So that definitely kind of was a stat pattern for Utah, but also for Cam Rising. And also, he only ran the ball 6 times, which again is kind of weird, but I think a lot of that was just to do with the fact that they pulled the starters so quick because they had so many of those just big bust plays. I think this is a really easy pick here. Utah minus 14.5, minus 110. I'm putting 1.1 unit on it. I don't understand the line. I think this is going to be closer to a blowout than it's closer to close. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on Baylor, but I just don't see them being able to hang around. I really don't. Next game that I'm talking about is going to be another fun one, but fun for different reasons. That is Iowa State at Iowa. Iowa is 3-point favorites, minus 152 on the money line. Iowa State is plus 126 on the money line, and the over-under is 35.5. The last few years, the over-under was probably way lower than this. But I think Iowa's offense is going to be better this year than it has been the last couple of years. They get Ferentz back this week, so the offense is probably going to be better than it was last week, and they did put up 40 points last week. Most of that was the ground game, though. I still don't trust Cade McNamara. I don't think he's going to be that good of a quarterback. I think he's going to be one of those try not to fuck it up quarterbacks instead of those try to win you a game quarterbacks. But the ground game did look decent last week. That being said, they were playing a pretty bad team, so obviously you can't really put that into much. Iowa State's defense looked really good against North Dakota last week, and I think that's going to be a big part of their team this year. And this is basically just 2 good defenses going up against each other with 2 average offenses. So you stick with the tried and true bet for Hawkeyes games. You go with the under 35.5. It's minus 106. So I'm going to put 1.1 unit on that one. I know this is probably a boring pick, but if it wins you money, it's not boring, right? So one that I really like for this week. Next one that I'm going into is another one that the line doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Cal at Auburn. Auburn is 13.5-point favorites, minus 500 on the money line. Cal is plus 375 on the money line, and the over-under is 53.5. Sorry, if you can't tell, my allergies are killing me. So, but yeah, I mean, I think this one is weird because Auburn should be favored by way more than this to me. I mean, Cal didn't look good last week against UC Davis. They won 31-13, but without an 80-yard kick return for a touchdown, this easily could have been a 1-possession game. Their quarterback Mendoza only went for 158 yards on 15 of 22 passing, and the run game wasn't really great either. I don't think they're going to be that good of a team this year, and they have to travel to Auburn, which is, across the country for this game. As for Auburn, they beat the hell out of Alabama A&M, which obviously they should have, but the team looked good during the game, which I think helps when you're playing those shit teams like that. You can kind of tell sometimes if the team's actually playing good versus they're just playing a really bad team. And I think Auburn actually looked pretty good. And I think Hugh Freeze is going to have them ready for this one. Obviously, being that they're in the SEC with the new 12-team format in the playoffs, they think they can make the playoffs. So these kind of beat-up games early in the season like this, which I don't know if a lot of people are calling this a beat-up game, but it can definitely potentially be called a blowout game. Or beat-up game, whatever I just said. I don't even remember. I think he's going to have them ready for this one, and I think they easily cover this line. I think this is another game where it's going to be closer to a blowout than it is close. So Auburn minus 13.5, minus 105, 1.1 unit on this one as well. I just don't understand the line here, and I think this is an easy bet. This one, though, I do not think is an easy bet, and I think this is going to be a great game. Sam Houston at UCF. UCF is 21.5-point favorites. They are minus 2,100 on the money line. Sam Houston State is plus 1,000 on the money line, and the over-under is 56.5. If you didn't watch the Sam Houston Rice game last week, Sam Houston was 10-point underdogs, and they ended up winning the game by 20. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people this year after being, this is only their second year in the FBS. They only won 3 games last year, but I think they're going to be a lot better this year. And I think they've already not proved it, but maybe put people on notice last week in the game with Rice. Hunter Weston, their quarterback, he threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the run game had almost 200 rushing yards as well. The defense also played well. They only gave up 47 rushing yards. They also got 2 sacks and 2 interceptions too. I mean, as a whole, they just looked really good. Now, granted, they were playing Rice, but they look better playing Rice than a lot of these Power 5 teams did playing FCS schools. So I do think that tells you something in that game. Now, UCF, they beat the hell out of New Hampshire 57-3, but it's New Hampshire. And so, I think what's more telling in that game is KJ Jefferson. He wasn't great. At least he wasn't great throwing. He was better in the run game, which obviously is kind of what he does. So that makes sense. But he went 7 of 14 for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. Throwing the ball, he did have an interception also. But the running game is obviously what worked for Arkansas last week. They had over 450 rushing yards as a team. 142 of those were from RJ Harvey. And they're basically just going to rely on the run. Now, if they can't run and they have to trust KJ Jefferson's arm, I think they could be in trouble in any game. Well, Sam Houston's defense did really well last week against the run. They only gave up 47 yards. So obviously they're not going to be able to do that against this rushing style from Arkansas, but I don't think they're going to give up 450 rushing yards like New Hampshire did last week. So I think they are going to have to rely on KJ Jefferson a little bit more in the passing game, and I think that sets him up to make mistakes. So I'm going with Sam Houston plus 21.5. I don't think they win this game, but I think they have a great chance of covering. So Sam Houston plus 21.5, minus 110. I'm putting 1.1 units on that one as well. Next game is another big one. And another big one for the ACC and the SEC. Tennessee at NC State. Tennessee is 9.5-point favorites, minus 350 on the money line. NC State is plus 275 on the money line. And the over-under is 60.5. Now, this was kind of 2 different games last week. NC State and Grayson McCall did not look very good last week against Western Carolina. McCall went 26 of 40 for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns and then 1 interception, which sounds like a pretty good stat line, but it didn't look as good as it does on paper. And I think if he does some of the stuff that he did last week against a good team, especially an SEC team, it could turn ugly very quickly. He's going to have to play a much better game this week than he did last week in Carolina. Well, they're in Carolina this week too. You get my point. Running back Jordan Waters did run for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think they are going to have to rely on him a good bit in this offense to not only get yards and first downs, but also to open it up for Grayson McCall a little bit. Because if the running game's not working and they have to solely rely on McCall, again, I think a lot of mistakes could happen. The defense really did not look very good. They gave up 241 passing yards and 120 rushing yards to a team that has a pretty good shot of losing to Campbell this week. I think just because they won and they did, end up winning pretty handedly towards the end of the game, I don't think that tells the full tale of this team. And I think that they could be in trouble. As for the Tennessee side, they beat the hell out of Chattanooga. The team looked good pretty much as a whole, and until McCall can show me something to trust him, I'm just not going to bet him. So I'm going to run Tennessee minus 9.5, minus 112, 1.2 units. Yeah, roll with Tennessee, and against good teams, I'm just not going to bet NC State until they show me to do it. So pretty simple there on that one. Another team that we've already talked about and won us some money this time. Colorado at Nebraska. Nebraska is minus 7.5, minus 220 on the money line. Colorado is plus 180 on the money line, and the over-under is 55.5. Last week, the Colorado game pretty much went exactly how I thought it would. And that's awesome. I hope I can continue to do that all year. I think this one's probably going to go kind of similarly. Now they were favored last week. They're not favored this week. That's pretty much the only difference. Colorado won 31-26 against North Dakota State. The defense looked bad. The defensive line looked a little bit better than they did last year, but they still didn't look great to me, especially with all the transfers they got in and all the hype that they've gotten in the offseason. Travis Hunter obviously looked pretty good, but the rest of the defense just didn't. I mean, they gave up 300 yards through the air. They also gave up 157 rushing yards. And they let North Dakota State go 7-13 on third down, and they didn't force a turnover. So it's just not a defense that you want to rely on in any game, but especially in games like this that could be, big on the line of scrimmage, aggressive, and that's exactly how Nebraska is going to want to play this game. That's what Rule does. Now their offense, of course, did look good, mainly Shadur and Hunter, but again, I think the offensive line is going to be the deciding factor in this one. They only gave up 1 sack last week, which for this offense is like incredible. Like, holy shit, we only gave up 1 sack. But that probably changes in this game unless this offensive line can take a serious step forward. As for Nebraska, they look pretty good on both sides of the ball, but it was against UTEP. So again, what can you really say? Because it was against UTEP. But Raiola did throw the ball really well. 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. The run game looked good. They had a number of guys getting carries for them, and their defense actually looked good good last week too. They only gave up 205 total yards of offense, only 56 yards on the ground. I think this is a game where Nebraska could potentially get up to a lead, and Colorado kind of has to play from behind a little bit, but that shouldn't affect it much because Colorado is built to play from behind. They don't run the ball really at all. They have an offense where they can get big plays in any minute, and they can score very quickly. So I'm going to bet Colorado plus 7.5 here, minus 126. I'm putting 1.3 units on it. I don't know if they can get the win. They definitely potentially could. So betting the money line might be worth like a half unit sprinkle here. But the plus 7.5, I just don't think they lose by more than a touchdown. I don't trust Nebraska yet. And with the volatility of this offense, I mean, they can score in like 10 seconds. So I just think more than a touchdown is too many points. Give me Colorado. Another really easy one to me, and I only got 3 left, by the way. I got this one and 2 more, so hang in there with me. Appreciate y'all hanging out. I know this is kind of a longer one than I normally do, but just 3 left. And this one's not going to take long because this one's just this is easy to me. Houston at Colorado. Oklahoma. Just did Colorado. I'll start over. Give me a second. Houston at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is 27.5 point favorites, minus 7,000 on the money line. Houston is plus 2,000 on the money line, and the over-under is 49.5. To me, this is just going to be a blowout. Oklahoma looked really good against Temple. They won 51-3, but they dominated pretty much the entire game. And Houston looked awful against UNLV. They basically don't have an offensive line. I mean, they looked horrible. So this one's pretty simple. Oklahoma minus 27.5, minus 118, 1.2 units. And that's it for that one. I think that's going to be like a 40-point game. Another really good one for this weekend. Appalachian State at Clemson. Clemson is minus 17, minus 880 on the money line. App State is plus 580 on the money line, and the over-under is 52.5. Now, this one is a little bit harder of a read because pretty much the entire football world knows that Clemson didn't look that good last week. Their offense looked pretty stagnant for a lot of the game. Their defense didn't do that good against the run game. And yeah, they just looked bad. But how much of that was Clemson versus how much of that was the Georgia defense? Georgia's defense is probably one of the best in the country. So you would think that the offense isn't going to look great. But I still don't trust Cade Klubnik. I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. I don't think he's the guy. And I don't know how good the offense can be with him at quarterback. Other side of the ball, Appalachian State. They look pretty good against ETSU. They won 38-10. Quarterback Joey Aguilar put up pretty good numbers, going 22 of 36 for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. Appalachian State, they've been the team to go into stadiums like this and get the win. They have beaten big teams in big spots like this before. And I think App State's offense can do enough to stay in this one. I don't think they're going to win, but I definitely think they have a good chance of covering. So I'm going App State plus 17, minus 110, 1.1 unit. And the last one, Boise State at Oregon. Oregon is minus 18.5, minus 1,050 on the money line. Boise State plus 640 on the money line, and the over-under is 60.5. Again, the whole world knows how bad Oregon looked last week. They just had a terrible game against Idaho. The offense put up a decent amount of yards, but they had a lot of mistakes on both sides of the ball. Dylan Gabriel looked scared to throw it down the field for some reason. It was just a really weird game. I think a lot of that's fixed for Oregon this week. I think they look like a completely different team, and I think they play a whole lot better. But Boise State's offense looked really good last week too, especially Ashton Jonty. He rushed for almost 300 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is absolutely nuts, and that was before he started cramping up. He could have had a lot more yards potentially. They scored 56 points against Georgia Southern, but the defense was basically non-existent, and Georgia Southern stayed in the game pretty much the entirety of the game because of their really bad defense. So with Boise State's running game, with Oregon most likely fixing a lot of the problems they had last week, I think there's a lot of points in this one, and I think they cover the spread. So I'm going over 60.5 at minus 115, 1.2 units on that one. And that's it. Those are the bets that I like for college for this week. Sorry that it is a longer video. Thank you for those of you that hung out with me. I appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe for me. It helps me out a lot. Tell your friends to watch the video. Helps me out a lot. And yeah, keep an eye out for future videos. I will be having an NFL week's pick here shortly, so watch out for that one. Now, I'll see y'all next time.